Well, hello, one concurrent viewer. I noticed that in my previous stream I only had one concurrent viewer throughout, and now it's gone to 0 concurrent viewers, and Dr. Mengele was nowhere in sight. He always comes by. I wonder if he's ill. I do hope not. Poor Dr. Mengele. A doctor being ill. They are the world's worst patients, aren't they? Well, that's nice to know, Howard, that you got a notification. I guess I just streamed at the wrong time, and the title was not attractive. You thought I was just going to say the same old thing again and you didn't want to hear it again. I don't know. But now I have a few things I want to say about. Well, I was thinking I'd like to say a few things about Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, everybody's getting in on it, and it's ridiculous, really. She considers herself an intelligent woman, and I well remember her comments about rape, and I rather like it when celebrities dare to talk about these things. I mean, I don't want to see them, lose their jobs just because they venture to say what they want to say about things. I don't know why it still goes bing. I thought I'd muted my phone, so perhaps I'll just put it behind my back or something and it won't be so intrusive. Right, and I better go and have a look at my Telegram group, because the discourse today was about, I don't know, it seemed to be about Telegram anyway. Maybe I imagine things. So I saw that Ralph was on The Crucible, and he did sort of mention me. I know he's a bit obsessed with me, and I live rent-free in his mind, and he's sort of making a point of never mentioning me by name, but, I noticed when he talked about the Chinese Quranist and that kind of thing, and he's also been making a few, slightly racist comments about, different ways of thinking. I don't mind. I'm never, not going to report people for being racist. It's not my style. I mean, unlike Ralph, I don't, use the rules to try and bully people. But I know he can't help it. He's not really a gentleman. He can't help himself, and when confronted with an idea he can't argue against, his response is to throw rocks at it. Though you'd expect something a little better from somebody who went to a good school in London. Today, I read an article in Countercurrents about Islam. I mean, it's so outrageous that I extracted bits of it from Voice of Reason, and I made clear what I disagreed with it about. It's by somebody called Mark Gulick, and interestingly, I found something mentioned by Alison Shablow about Muslim grooming gangs, and I think she got into a bit of trouble over it. And what I support about what she said was that, well, Muslims are just more organised because they grow up in whole families where fathers are present. Now, Alison didn't say this, but this is what I say about grooming gangs in the north of England. And it is this, that if you grow up in a family where the father is the authority figure, you are more likely to be successful because you would be socially acculturated to being cooperative, because your family has some kind of hierarchical structure of, who has a final word about things, and you instinctively transfer this sort of hierarchical authority to your dealings with people outside the family. So you have a kind of idea of who's leader, and when you have a leader, your group is organised better than if you didn't have a leader, in which case you probably had no group, right? Or if you did have a group, you'd fight and the group would soon break up. So this is the kind of social structure that I'm talking about when I promote hierarchy as a form of organisation that will make your society more efficient. Right from the beginning, about the rearing of the next generation, to, well, even bad things like criminal enterprises, and child prostitution rings are obviously criminal enterprises. One of the things I said about these grooming gangs, in response to this article that was saying, oh, it's because Muslims are, they hate us, they want to take our women and as a show of conquest, and it's so patently untrue. The reason why the police left them alone was because they couldn't work out whether they did those things because they were Muslim or in spite of being Muslim. And if you ask the gang members, I'm sure they wouldn't be able to tell you either. They just found themselves doing it because, well, I guess they did it and nobody told them not to, and they pushed things a bit further and they got no pushback and they just carried on. And I said a long time ago that this was interesting, not because of the usual feelings of outrage, which I know, Islamophobes wanted, and they wanted, really, whether they say it or not, they wanted vigilante retribution, and they were aghast that it didn't happen. And I'm saying it's not going to happen in a matriarchy, because men in a matriarchy just can't organise themselves. As I keep saying, they can't even organise a piss up in a brewery. All they can do is complain like women and then shut up, forget about it, or maybe they'll mention it again a bit later. And one of the things that the British ought to know is that criminal enterprises are no longer, they can't even, the white indigenous men can't even lead their own criminal enterprises. It's always foreign gangs, right? Albanian gangs. Any foreign gang, it's not the white person. It's not by white men. Now, you might think, oh, it's because white men are so, gentle and law-abiding and all that kind of thing. It's not even that, is it? They just can't organise themselves. This is the thing. They can't. Moral degeneracy, intellectual degeneracy, and they can't talk about it. Because I guess they half know it's true. And they don't want to give up what prevents them from climbing out of this morass of degeneracy. They're too hooked on what they are addicted to, because they're all morally compromised. They're not marriageable, and they know they can't expect high standards from their women because they have low standards, right? And if anybody else would, should come along, such as me, to say that perhaps they should have higher standards, they would throw rocks at me, and they have. So Alison understands. The local men are able to protect the local women. White working class women convert to Islam if they want to be married mothers and not pumped and dumped, unmarried, various single mothers with variously fathered illegitimate offspring. So if you're working class, and knew what you want, you decide pretty early that you would best convert to Islam and find yourself a decent Muslim man to marry who will make an honest woman of you and give you legitimate children, and who will be grateful that he's got himself a white woman, since they're not appreciated by men of their own race. I've explained this quite a few times. This isn't the first time I've talked about this. But for some reason, the cowardly men of the alt-right reject my message. They don't want to hear it. They can't. It's not that they're going to talk about these things amongst themselves. They're not going to talk about it amongst themselves because we know who they are and what they are. Unmarriageable men. And if they're not unmarriageable, if they're married like Ed Dutton, he's not going to alienate his subscribers, right? Who are unmarriageable men. So, even if they weren't conspiring to prevent the discussion of secular Quranism, these would be their main considerations, because they are cowardly and morally compromised men who don't want to acknowledge how cowardly and morally compromised they are. Joe has helped me a little by what he's been saying. He's saying, well, they have no reason to entertain you. And I'm saying, if they care about their country, if they care about their society, they are morally obliged to consider any proposal that purports to be a solution. That's what they're morally obliged to do. I don't think they understand what moral obligation means. I think they only act according to their inclinations, and I suppose Millennial Woes knows that Mark Collett wouldn't approve of him platforming me. It doesn't just wouldn't platform me because, well, I think we know why Ed Dutton wouldn't platform me. I'm not compliant enough. I wouldn't be overawed by his intellect, shall we say. What is sad about Millennial Woes is that every now and then, inadvertently, he blurts out my ideas. I'm not saying that he wouldn't have thought of them, without me, because they're only natural questions that one would ask. I think I only ask natural, logical questions. And then he is made to forget about them again, probably by Mark Collett, because I think he's a little in awe of him, because, well, Mark is a bit of a bully, isn't he? But for men who are behaving like women, I think they're behaving like women because what they're doing is refusing to think independently, refusing to act independently, and submitting to the authority of Mark Collett just because, well, he's a bit of a bully, he has a political party that will never get anywhere, and he is also morally compromised in that he is not married to the mother of his offspring. So men like that are not going to naturally come round to my way of thinking about it being compulsory to marry before having children, and I'm saying that is exactly the problem. This is, of course, disappointing, but it doesn't in any way prove that I'm wrong about anything that I've said. In fact, it proves me exactly right about the moral cowardice of men who can't even think the thought that they must say in order to do the thing that they must do to get their country back from, well, the people who shouldn't be in charge, the people who don't support marriage, who don't want us talking about these things either. The matriarchy, in other words. Now for things to flip, people have to use the right words in the right way. How many of the alt-right are going to use the word matriarchy? It's not a word that many use. Kevin Michael Grace occasionally uses it, but he's Canadian and really not well known here. How well known am I? I think I'm pretty well known, but there is a conspiracy of silence to not acknowledge my ideas by people with bigger YouTube channels who don't agree. No, there's nothing to disagree with. They can't argue. They can't argue against my idea. They can't produce any rational argument against it, so they conspire to not discuss my idea. And I think the best they can come up with is that it's not British. It can become British. Anything can become British if you acquire it and use it in this country. I do understand what I propose is challenging 2,000 years of Christian history and 250 years of liberalism. And I make no bones about admitting this. But when you know something, it's basically a headless corpse, and really the most despised religion in the West, even more despised than Islam, then you know it is time to call a corpse a corpse, to acknowledge that the Church of England was always a creature of the state, so it is no surprise that the Archbishop of Canterbury would be, well, falling in line with whatever the government wants a church to say. It has no principles. This is what you must understand. Christianity has no principles. It only has the one about being Christian, which is to worship Jesus as God, and that's it. The rest you're supposed to trust your monarch, trust your government, and then assume that if you're a law-abiding citizen, you will get to heaven. Not so the Quran, which has all kinds of principles that you can find if you would only read it. And because it is so well known, no government is going to tell you that what you plainly read in the Quran ain't in the Quran and doesn't matter. Because you would know it is supposed to be the word of God. This is how you challenge your government when it makes up laws to do you down. We all know that if you wanted to play a game of Monopoly or anything at all, we would need to consult the rules. And anyone with any sense at all would know that every player of the game is entitled to read the rules of the game, and that is basically the Constitution. And if the government says it's hidden or it's half written and half not, then you know it's trying to pull the wool over your eyes, sheeple. As for the New Testament, it has no laws. It has no laws said to come from God. It has no laws said to come from Jesus. So we know the consequences of a corrupt political establishment who change the rules while the game is still in play. Are we so stupid that we still want to play the game? Are we still going to trust them to say what the rules are when they change it so blatantly? But worst of all are the people who complain about it and refuse to do anything. Well, refuse to do the obvious thing that is needed to challenge it, which is to discuss what the problem is. It seems I have no support. People like Ralph has more support because you know how he panders to both sides. He even admitted it as much. He admitted as much on his interview in the Crucible, which I can't find anywhere. Maybe it's just lost. Ralph thinks that by cleaving to Christianity, he will... What will he do? What does he think he will do? Pander to more people with his nonsense. He has evolved a few techniques and that might work on weaker people. I let him post his comments on my videos, asking me to list the lies that I've told, and then get impatient with me when I refuse. He's used to dealing with people who are not very bright. Perhaps he seeks them out. While I would prefer to seek people who are above me, but it seems there are none. There are only intellectual and moral pygmies who dare not discuss what they know they must discuss, who are really frightened little boys who don't want to grow up. And that is why their women despise them. Let's see how many people are in the chat now. Seven, not so bad. So it was just a fluke. I thought I might have been shadow banned. What is nothing to do with religion, Joe? What is my caricature of Western men? Are they not moral and intellectual pygmies? And Joe can't bring himself to accept that women do convert to Islam in order to become mothers of legitimate children. I don't think Joe's interested in marrying, but he still expects women to, what? Not marry and stay white, but die childless. So Joe thinks that Dutton's followers are, what, not incels? Tiffany's not getting notifications from me. I wonder if Dr. Mengele is. So Joe says their husbands don't like being dumped. Oh right, he's talking about Muslim men. Well, secular Quranism would abolish no-fault divorce. Lammy, I think you should know that what has caused MGTOW and MRA is feminism. And, well, MGTOW and MRA is a reaction, understandable reaction to feminism. It is secular Quranism that is the real solution. Our dual citizen is arguing the toss with me about alt-right. I like alt-right. Dissident right sounds so pretentious, and it's the same people anyway with the same old grievance, so I like alt-right because it conveys exactly what I want, what I understood it to mean, which is anyone who doesn't believe that mainstream conservatism will ever address the problems caused by liberal government promoting liberalism, whatever it is. What about What about 16th century Venice lords? What do you mean by intellectual verse? What do you mean? Can you think of an intellectual verse in the Bible? If you can, then I'll think of the equivalent. But I don't understand the question at the moment. What's my height got to do with anything? Seamus Crawford, I never said I would ban divorce. I'm trying to remember if there was anything more I wanted to say, apart from talking about what I've done today so far. I'll post in the chat the link to my blog post. Oh, I also saw a video by John Mearsheimer called The Case for Restraint. It's, well, you might like it if you're interested in foreign policy, in American foreign policy. I'm quite interested in these things. But this is a blog post to my my response really to countercurrents. Just ridiculously Islamophobic, hysterically so, and it just had to be, well, challenged. Well, I don't know what you mean by intellectual. I don't know what you mean. Just give me an example of intellectual, and I'll see if I can equal that in the Quran. Midnight Rider says, the word incel is a new 21st century insult for single men who simply see marriage as devalued in our wonky times. Well, under what I propose, all bachelors would be incels unless they were regular clients of their local brothel. James Crawford. So you don't agree with no-fault divorce? You mean you don't agree with the banning of no-fault divorce? Is that what you're saying? So you think anybody can just walk out of a marriage and take half of the wealthier partner's assets? Is that what you think? I don't see what my height has to do with it. I'm talking about moral pygmy, so it's not my actual height that is at issue here. Dual citizen, don't you know that I've engaged with E. Michael Jones twice already? There are 2 videos on the Claire Core channel of him and me talking, and did you know that? Oh yes, I did want to talk about Whoopi Goldberg. Thanks, Midnight Rider, for reminding me. I did sort of talk about her briefly. So she says it's not about race. I mean, it's obviously idiotic to say it's not about race, because Jews are an ethnicity, and that's another word for race. It's just that people can still hate you even though you look like them, right? You know, I should know because, well, anybody would know that your biggest enemy might not necessarily be somebody of a different race to you. I mean, if you look at the crime statistics, well, actually, I haven't looked at it really, but I'm sure I read somewhere that if you are murdered, you would be, okay, the police investigating your murder would immediately suspect your spouse, right? And if they eliminate your spouse, then they'll suspect anyone who has who would benefit from your death. And if there's nobody who would benefit from your death, well, because you have no property, then they would have to ask themselves, who wants you dead? Who hates you? I mean, that's how murder investigations are conducted, isn't it? Or have I read too many detective novels? So if we are murdered, we would be most likely murdered by somebody we have had sex with. So there you go. That's something to think about, isn't it? Boys and girls. My height, I'm 5'6". Yeah, Seamus Crawford, so he thinks he wants to take half the assets of his wife. So he's hoping to marry her. I think we can safely assume that Seamus is not a wealthy man. So, what else did I want to say? Oh yes, I've covered masculinity and, your inability to organise yourselves, and this is evidenced by the vigilante retribution that you're all so disappointed didn't happen. But I'm thinking, if I wanted to I will have to retitle this stream. So what have I been talking mostly about? Patriarchy, masculinity, male solidarity, male cooperation, criminal enterprises. Well, any enterprise really. We're talking about the ability of men to cooperate and the hierarchical authority that will allow them to organise. I mean, you can imagine what will happen if there was no leader in an army. Well, nothing would get done, right? That's why it's so important in the army to have an unquestionable chain of command. So, the weakest link. You know who didn't, pass. You would immediately know who didn't obey orders or who failed to pass on orders. So, in this pyramid of the military, you would know. Everyone would know his place and know what they were supposed to do. And that's how you get things done. But currently, God knows what you think you're doing. So I'm confronted with men who call themselves nationalists, too afraid to discuss my ideas, the ideas of little old me. Can it be the case that these men don't think that they need a religion to to maintain morality. I mean, just read the farewell speech of George Washington. Perhaps reading is not their strength. Yeah, Seamus Crawford, I'm not surprised at what you say. I can tell that you're going to be one of those people who have those conventional beliefs, and then you wonder why the Jews and the Muslims are powering ahead of you. And Whoopi has been married and divorced 3 times. I didn't know that, but she's certainly a woman with a mind of her own and opinions and. The thing about being a celeb is that, you never know when your public are going to get tired of you. And so if you say one too many edgy thing, that might be the end of you. And, well, I'm sure there are plenty of people ready to take her place, and I'm sure that her pension is adequate, even if she never worked again. Howard, thank you for saying nationalism is one thing, but ethno-nationalism is retarded. Well, don't try to fly before you can even crawl, right? You're not going to get your ethno-nationalism in the same way that you're not going to get from 0 to 100 miles an hour without a car. So we all have to be more realistic, and we need to firstly identify the problem. And if you don't think that I have diagnosed the problem correctly, then by all means challenge it. But what I read, Telegram groups is just the whinging about the vaccine, and it's like no, let others whinge about the vaccine and lockdown. There are more important things that people who call themselves nationalists should be discussing, like secular Quranism, right? Like questions like, can we do without a religion? Have there been any societies that have remained in existence without religion? And what kind of religion? It would of course be a religion that supports marriage and family values. And if Christianity has been taken over by liberalism because it's such a moral vacuum, then obviously it's the weakest link, right? It's the weakest link. You're the weakest link. Goodbye, as Anne Robinson would say. All she does is personal attacks. I'm afraid I have to identify people who are the problem. I am trying to get things done. They are people who won't do what they're supposed to do. I'm not asking anything unreasonable, am I? I'm just asking political commentators to comment. And Joe is saying I should respect their feelings. If they don't want to talk about secular Quranism, it's a matter for them. Howard Shunova says race is imaginary. Well, I don't think it is imaginary. I mean, people can see it, but it's not. That's not really the problem. People focus on things that aren't the problem. I mean, yeah, you can get a bag of Smarties and say, "Ooh, the red ones are poisonous, but the blue ones are magic," or whatever. But you would be wrong, right? You just choose to fetishize red Smarties and blue Smarties and whatever. And what's happening with Whoopi is basically that there will be people who want to knock her off her perch because she's been there for so long. She's known for being outspoken, and there's also this competition for victimhood status, between blacks and Jews. So it's not that surprising that this should happen. But I'm saying we don't want any part of it because it's undignified to seek victimhood status. It's particularly undignified for men to do it. It works for women, but not for men. Theocracy is, well, I think you have a problem with theocracy per se, and I'm saying you should actually look at the rules and see that the rules do discourage a number of evils that ought to be discouraged, such as income disparity, unmarried parenthood, theft, dishonesty, that kind of thing. Joe has it in for Islam because he's an atheist, but he hasn't got a better idea. So I think he's being a bit unreasonable if he just reads the Quran and says, "Oh, it's a bit mean about non-Muslims." What's wrong with liking Mein Kampf, eh, Joe? You can enjoy Mein Kampf and not be an anti-Semite. It's a great book. I recommend people read it. Hitler writes with great insight and compassion about the poor. The basis on which I propose to establish a theocracy is the Quran. Midnight Rider, I don't think anybody should be seeking to measure their status by their victimhood. It's only when your society is already a matriarchy that you get people doing that. Men would just not do that. Yeah, Joe's just going, "Oh, the Quran said mean things about non-Muslims. I can't take it." Is the Quran true about what? No. Is the Quran the best available guide to humanity? That is a question you must ask yourself. But, if you're not capable of reading it, then I guess you'll never know. I think I've said all I wanted to say on all the subjects that I wanted to discuss. Unless you have any questions for me. What you could do to help is say new words like matriarchy. Just to show that you get the message, and then try explaining matriarchy to your best friend if you've got a friend at all. And then, once you've explained it to your best friend, to try and explain it to more people, to challenge yourselves. And then, say, and the West is a matriarchy, and that ain't good. Joe, you probably are aware of the scale of my ambition. While the Muslims only hope to convert non-Muslims soul by soul, I hope to convert non-Muslims nation by nation. No, Seamus, you're using the wrong word about the Quran being true. It's a guide, so it has to be the best guide, and you can say, oh, guide to where? And I'm saying guide to a stable society. I guess that's what you want. I mean, you're complaining about your society being unstable and seeing all these changes that you find disturbing, and knowing that your government doesn't care about you. So what you want, therefore, is that your government can be trusted to govern in a national interest, and that would be nationalism. Nationalism is government in the national interest. But unfortunately, there are all these nationalists who are not able to discuss ideas at all. They can't agree with me that nationalism should be defined as government in a national interest, apart from Andrew Wilson, who agreed immediately. But the others, the British variety, they go all funny and they think, oh, you're trying to take it away from us white people, and therefore we're not going to agree. It's got to be something about white people. And it's like, no, it can't be about white people. It's got to be something abstract. Because if it's about white people, then, well, it's dead in the water. It'll already be racist and everybody will take against it. Well, patriarchy is the opposite of matriarchy. As I've said, matriarchy is a society prioritizing the preferences of unmarried parents who casually conceived and casually parented their illegitimate offspring. And patriarchy is a society prioritizing the preferences of married parents who want to properly parent their legitimate offspring. It's easy to remember, isn't it? I don't need to convert anyone, all I need to do is explain why patriarchy is better than matriarchy. And I think you get that, Joe. You're just not prepared to pay the price. Alright, it's nearly an hour. So I'll just finish. Thank you all for coming, and I'll speak to you again soon.